everyone, welcome back again to the NPTEL online course on research methodology for planning and architectural studies. So, in our previous two lectures in research process part 1 and part 2, we have discussed different components starting from defining research problem, literature review, hypothesis formulation, research design and data collection. So, in this particular lecture, lecture number 8, we will take up the remaining part of it, which is about the analysis of data, hypothesis testing as a part of the analysis, interpreting the result and reporting, and finally also a brief idea about a typical structure of a thesis. So, this is the overall process diagram that we have been discussing for last 3 lectures including this. So, now we are concentrating on this particular part of data analysis. So far we have understood how to collect the data, what are the different considerations that we need to make to collect the data, and also different type of survey technique. Now, once it is available with you the data, then how to go ahead. Now, in the analysis of data, this is something very important and probably most interesting part of your research, where you are trying to see the phenomena, for which the assumptions you made that this can go like this can happen like this factor is going to influence this. So, this is going to give you those kind of findings, the taste of your entire process. So, this is a series of systematic steps to derive meaningful insight, identify the patterns and draw conclusion from the collected information. So, after collection, analysis is the next stage where you will see the overall findings. In this case, few of the stages which are involved, one is the data cleaning, data exploration, data transformation, statistical analysis that to be applied on that data, and then interpretation of the result and reporting and visualization. So, in all these steps are very essential and these are all you can say sequential. So, one after another that are required. Now, coming to the data cleaning part. So, in this case reviewing the collected data to identify and correct errors and also identify the outliers. So, many times we collect information and then we try to see the pattern. Say for example, in a particular data, say you just collect certain sort of rainfall over time. So, from secondary information you collected that in a particular city that this is the rainfall for last say 10 years. So, in that case definitely when it is from some meteorological department and all, it seems to be authentic. But it may happen that okay, in a particular year or in a particular day of that event, it is something not matching with the trend. So, it is the extreme kind of rainfall. So, that will become some sort of outlier. If we take that into account in our data and try to project it or make the trend prediction, so maybe we can commit certain kind of mistake. So, for that it is very important to identify those outliers. Say for example, even if you want to do something on that doing some experiment to understand the effect of the speed of a vehicle on a highway. So, with certain instrument you are measuring the spot speed of those kind of vehicles. So, you are keep on measuring that okay, it is 80 kilometer, it is 50 kilometer, it is 60 kilometer, and then all of a sudden you will find one particular vehicle is 180 kilometers or one vehicle is just 10 kilometer, which probably is not expected. So, these are becoming outliers where you are going for such kind of measurement kind of survey. Now, if you want to do a perception survey, there you are asking, say for example, you state your satisfaction towards the pedestrian facilities in a city and you give that okay, you state your satisfaction 1 to 5 scale. So, where 1 is you are least satisfied and 5 is you are highly satisfied, and then you gather say 500 information. So you may find that okay, pertinent to that particular questions, you have follow a few questions, and in such cases you will find that some of the informations are not filled in, or few of the information is looking some sort of randomly filled thing, that a particular survey questionnaire everything is filled like neutral, neutral, neutral. So which is going to give you some sort of kind of indicator. Even for the online survey, there are other few indicators that normally we also check the time to be taken on average to fill up a questionnaire. So, for reading a question, for understanding a question and responding, it will require certain time in our mind. So, if you find a questionnaire online, it filled in very quick time, so that means it is not really a proper filled up questionnaire, or maybe one particular questionnaire is taking time, say more than usual. So, a typical timing is maybe 2-3 minutes, and it is taking say 2-3 hours. So, that means also there might be some sort of error. So, we have to flag those kind of errors and try to clean those kind of errors. There might be some kind of inconsistency in the data responses that I mentioned, or it can be the missing values, because if there are certain missing values, so for our analysis purpose it will be difficult. How to deal with the missing data and all, we will discuss it later, but normally this is the first stage of data cleaning process. Next is the data exploration. So, we try to explore the characteristics of the data and try to understand its distribution, its central tendency and variability. So, these are different measures to check it. Say for example, the speed profile. So, again that there will be some kind of vehicle which is having very high mean speed, and then something is very high and something is very low. So, how it is being distributed, that maybe if you have the speed limit, say may example like you have the speed of say 30, or maybe here the speed is 50 and here maybe it is 80. So, in this case you just make a histogram kind of thing, right, some bar you just make based on the frequency. So, you will find that most of them are making some sort of average speed of 50-60, which is maybe also mentioned on the side of the road, and then few of them is above that and few of them are below that. So, this is something also we can understand through the performance of students in a particular subject. So, definitely there will be a mean value where maximum student will be there, few student will be like scoring very high grade and maybe few student below that particular average grade. So, we will try to identify the central tendency of that, where the data is decomposed, and then try to make the assumption. So, those kind of distribution can be a continuous distribution, it can be a discrete distribution. So, we will discuss that in detail, the difference between this discrete and continuous, but this is something in first hand we try to understand. And in such kind of cases we also do a kind of a normality test. So, if we find that okay, our data is following some sort of normality, it is following normal distribution or some known distribution, so then our next approach would be very much easier to follow the parametric test as an analysis method, or else we have to go for non-parametric test. So, where the parameters are not known, we cannot define the mean and other part. So, in such cases we have to apply some non-parametric test. So, in our hand we have both the options, but again it will depend on the data type, that what particular thing you will take up, or it will depend on the tendency of the data. So, it is very important whenever you go for a small sample. So, this parametric test is seems to be little difficult, because to follow certain distribution and all you need certain amount of data, and then there are different techniques by which you can transform the raw value to fit into a distribution. So, that we will discuss in detail when we discuss the data analysis part. Data transformation is the next step, where the modifying or transform the variables to meet the assumptions of statistical analysis. So, this data transformation is required many a times, because maybe when you collect the information, we collect it with certain kind of terminology. Say for example, we are going for a socio-economic survey along with the perception. So, perception survey is very clear that maybe we can just go for a 1 to 5 scale, or maybe we can go for a Likert scale. What is Likert scale we will also discuss in detail. So, this is again a you can say a measurement scale where we measure the agreement of a statement, or maybe it is something like importance or performance or argument, etc. Along with that, if we picked up some sort of socioeconomic information. Now, in that case, like socioeconomic information, if you want to capture the gender, so it is male, female, or other type, or it is something like when you ask normally the age group, we don't ask the age of the respondent, we define certain age group and then ask that person to feel that what is appropriate that he or she can take. Now, when the data is collected, to us male female is some sort of, you can say, the nominal variable where it is just like distinguishing male and female. But if you want to use it in your analysis, so we just transform it, we just make the coding to it like 0 or 1, so that it can interact well with other numeric data and can give you some sort of results. And there are other few transformation as well where we can go for a minimax transformation, or like jet transformation for any raw data if it is following certain distribution, so that we can normalize the data as well. Once it is done, the data is prepared, we go for statistical analysis. So, in this case we apply the appropriate statistical method or test based on the nature of data and the research questions. So, it can be parametric test where parameters are known, we can go for some kind of t test, we can go for some kind of f test, etc. But if we find that the data is not really following certain distribution and all, it is again the type of data is ordinal, where you cannot simply ordinal data is something where it can show the order. Okay, so there is nothing called making the average of that order. So, for such kind of cases we will not really going to use the parametric test like t test or z test, etc. So, in that case we go for some alternative test like Mann-Whitney test, or it can be Kruskal-Wallis test, and there are other few. So, as I already mentioned that for all such kind of testing and all, we will have very detailed discussion and all the doubts will be cleared at that particular stage of selecting what type of parametric or non-parametric test that you will pick up. And I will also show you with the example, so that you can understand the whole process, that in some cases like the parametric test was used and why it was used, and out of it what is the finding. Then once it is done, so next is that we get certain findings, certain values. After that, interpreting the result is the most critical and crucial stage of your entire research. So, if you interpret it wrongly, then your argument statement will also go wrong. Say for example, it is something like I can give you a medical side example, that after a blood test, so a complete blood count CBC test, you will have such kind of thing, WBC, RBC, platelet, then other lymphocyte, etc., etc. So, there are number of parameters that you will get certain value, and for any clinical test now they are also going to give you the range. So, for your understanding that okay, the hemoglobin is required something around this particular, say for a range of 11 to 13, and then if the value is higher or more, so there is indicator. But in such cases, like many a times, like we can look at this kind of pathological report and try to assess, okay, my hemoglobin is high or low, or my this platelet count is below par, or too much. So, that is some sort of understanding, but a doctor or a pathologist will tell you better in correlation with other findings, that okay, what exactly is happening wrong with the body, or what could be the challenges. So in such cases the interpretation of the result, okay, so your RBC goes down or your platelet goes down, there might be different reasons, or maybe it is some kind of effect of certain medicine, or maybe whatever the complication is going on into the overall process. So similarly, when you have those kind of statistical results, we have to check each and everything, that first of all that the sign it is coming up with, the relationship. If it is negative, then why it is negative? If it is positive, why it is positive? If it's supposed to be positive but come out to be negative, what could be the result? Is it the process is wrong, or the data is wrong, or what exactly, like there is some kind of change? Because if there is a certain belief in certain kind of phenomena, if you get just opposite to it, it is very difficult to establish it. But at the same time, it may come, if your process is right, if your argument is right, you can come up with those kind of argument. But say for example, there are few obvious things. Say for example, any sort of study on such kind of economic modeling or so, cost is something, the money is something where people having some sort of association with the negative sign. So cost is something called the disutility. So I am giving you one example, then it will be very clear to you. Suppose you want to travel from point A to point B. So from point A to point B, it is having some distance, and say for example simplicity that you walk and the distance is maybe 5 kilometer. Now if you start walking, right, so it will take some time, okay, 5 kilometer, how much time? It depends on your travel speed. But if it is say 5 kilometer is too much, I cannot walk, so you may have certain options. So this 5 kilometer you can use bus, you can use auto, you can use cycle, and each of them will take certain time. So okay, it will take certain time, and also it will have certain cost. Now if you say your cycle, as because it is your cycle, it will only take time, but there is no such cost involved. So apparently it sounds good, even when you walk there is no cost involved. Apparently it sounds good, but actually it is not, because there is some concept of time value of money. So time is equivalent to certain cost. We will discuss that in our further discussion. But say for example, for this timing, if you take auto and bus, so each will have certain cost. Maybe auto will take 20 rupees, bus will take 10 rupees. So in all such cases, you have to pay certain amount for this travel. Now say for example, if some kind of hypothetical environment is created that you can move from point A to B with 0 time and 0 cost. Okay. So this could be the ideal, that I do not need to pay anything, I do not need to invest any time, and I am just moving from one place to another. So it is not going to happen, we all know. So for that, next option is that we will try to find out the option which will going to take minimum cost or minimum time. If you only take only cost parameter and time is not that important to me, I have enough time, if it will take little more time it is okay, but I can go for that option which will cost me less. So for that, definitely in this case the bus will be the preferred option, because it is just the 10 rupees, keeping all other things constant. Okay, because those kind of decision is not that easy the way I am saying it, because bus you may need to wait, you may not get a seat, but auto you will get a seat. So there will be a multi criteria decision making. But if you only consider the cost, so this is something that you prefer 10 rupees rather than 20 rupees. So that means always the cost is such parameter, increase in cost will really bother you. So that means if you try to find out the utility of a cost, so it will normally come as a negative sign. So that means increase in cost will take you away from the option. So if a product is say 5 rupees, if you increase it to the 10 rupees, so probably the probability of selecting that product will be less. But again, there are certain constraints, because in this case if the things are like monopoly, you do not have any other choice and options, you go. So if it is something like a a gas cylinder, if it is just 400 rupees or it is maybe say 2000 rupees, if we do not have any other option, we will go for it. But in normal psychology, definitely this is something. So that is why, coming back to the point, that the sign, whether it is negative or positive, that will also make difference. So how you interpret that is very critical. So interpreting the results of statistical analysis or empirical findings in the context of research questions, that what was your questions and now whether you are getting your answer, whether your hypothesis is now proving true or false. After that, it is the reporting and visualization. So you have to report it with a proper technical writing, very simple, straightforward, give the essence of your findings, and the presentation. This presentation, sometimes it can be a infographics, it can be like a pie chart to show the distribution, it can be some kind of scatter plot, it can be a box plot. So there are different type of representation, or it can be simple illustrative table which can convey the meaning. So for depending on the type of information that you are going to show, you will have certain options to showcase. Even you must have tried it in your Excel, Microsoft Excel, that if you have a data set, then if you go to the chart menu, there are options. You can go bar, in bar also you can go for horizontal, vertical, you can have scatter plot, you can have some kind of line plot, you can have some kind of radar plot. And now with different type of other tools and plugin, you can also go for certain more interesting interpretive representation. That is very important. So with the very crisp form, a good figure or a good you can say a table can represent your findings very effective way. Say for example, like this is not very pertinent to this, but again if we go back to that particular stage of the COVID pandemic, so is to follow that kind of graph. So each day different kind of graph, it's keep on increasing, and then there are certain kind of other kind of pivot table that you select a particular district or select a particular state and try to see the variation. So there also you have different kind of 7-day average, there is a total data or daily data, depending on that you can interpret. So nowadays also you will find that okay, there are certain interesting dashboard that can be created with different plugin into Excel, and there are other few software also like Excel, where you can also generate good plot out of your results and then you can represent it. So you have to understand that what particular medium that you are going to use, which will solve the purpose effectively, and then you have to write it. Now coming to the hypothesis testing. So what exactly here to be tested? So for any assumptions that we make, so there will be some sort of test statistics to be formulated, that your mean value, what you expect, it's around certain kind of probability, that okay, your mean value is say statistically confident at 90% confidence level and all. So for such kind of case, like we have some sort of test, and here we are talking about most common test for parametric analysis, like one sample t-test. So we have a sample and then we try to find out the significance. So there are certain calculation depending on the state statistics and the way the statistics is been calculated. There are some kind of, you can say, the method, so by which you will get to know the value, and then you compare it with the threshold value of that. So for this we have certain sort of tables like Z table, T tables, F tables, and then we try to find it out. There are few other considerations like degree of freedoms and other part. So, by which you just compare with the critical value, and if it is above or below the critical value, we take a call on the hypothesis. So, as because we are going to discuss it in detail in subsequent presentation, we are not discussing much in this particular slide. So, it may be two sample t test where two separate sample can be taken into consideration. It can be pair t test where we can compare two different data set of the similar population, and then you can compare it, or it may be a before after test that you just try to understand the increase in performance of certain group of employee before and after giving the training, and then you try to assess it. It may be chi-square test, it may be the analysis of variance, and there are a number of such kind of test that is available. Compared to that also there are something on non-parametric test, that you have other Mann-Whitney test, you have Kruskal-Wallis test, and then there are many. So, we will discuss that where we try to find out that based on your assumptions, whatever the test statistics that you formulate, whether that is statistically significant at the desired confidence level, which compare it with the corresponding threshold value with the degree of freedom and all. Now, coming to the interpretation and reporting part. So, data interpretation is the first one where you have the statistical analysis, interpretation of statistical result in the context of research question. Then we have the contextual, understanding, the clarification of significance of the research, interpretation of result in the context of research objective that we need to interpret, pattern and trends identification as well as reporting of the trend observed in the data, implication of this pattern in relation to the objective. So, whatever your research question and objectives are defined, based on that we go for data interpretation. In this case, findings of the reporting, structured presentation, organization of findings in a clear and logical manner, so that it will have a sequence. Say for example, you want to do a survey to understand the perception on people towards the cleanliness in a city, overall cleanliness in a city. So, if you go for a aggregate level data, that means it is not mattered so much that what is people's income, what is people like gender, what is people age group on that perception. So, this is any people, it is a sample, and then you just try to understand that their perception different aspect of a cleanliness in a city. Now, suppose you want to understand further that this perception may vary, there might be some heterogeneity. So, whether there is some impact of age group, that my assumption that probably who are much more educated, they might have a better value to the cleanliness rather than who are having poor access to the education, or else the people who are at the age like above 40 or something, they are much more sensible towards the cleanliness rather than the young generation. So, we may have different hypotheses, and this is just for a reference I am saying. So, I do not have any personal bias on this particular statement of who is having better value to the cleanliness, but for this time being if we consider this. So, then this is something at the disaggregate level analysis, where you try to identify that whether there is some impact of this kind of age group, education level, income level on their perception. So, this should come after the overall result. So, in your description that should be something that this is the overall result, and then you can go for such kind of disaggregate level at heterogeneity level understanding. So, this sequence should be maintained. Then there should be visual representation to enhance the understanding and also the interpretation. Clarity and precision, the presentation of findings should be very clear, concise. in reporting you don't put everything to the reader's decision, that okay, you just understand what I want to convey. So if you are putting a table, you should have certain description. It's not the repetitive that you should write that okay, this table column 1 says this. You don't need to explain or describe the table, but out of the table make certain discussion, make some kind of engaging statement. You write some engaging statement which will convey and in alliance with that particular findings that is being in that table or in the figure. So that is something required, the findings reporting. Finally, findings, and then you come to the discussion. So in that discussion part, what you need to do, you have to interpret the results. So result is negative or positive. Now you have to discuss it and relate it with the research questions. Then you compare with the existing literature, that what findings you have achieved through your study, whether it is similar or dissimilar. So many a times you need to find out something like, it should also convey that okay, so and so also proved that okay, this age will have impact on this kind of decision making or this kind of perception. So your findings is also similar to that line. So that means yes, it is much more generalized. Somebody has done for some developed country, you are doing it for some other geographical region, but yes, there is some kind of issue. If it is dissimilar, then also you have to argue that okay, probably the other part is done in some geographical boundary where people might have different kind of quality of life or their average income, but such kind of things you need to discuss in a very clear manner. Then the limitation. So in this case, acknowledge and discuss the limitation of the study and how that will be tackled in future study. So again, in this case, after analyzing, you may find that okay, there may be a biasness, there might be something that you assume but it is not coming. So in that case, you can state that that is the limitation. Probably if it is confined to a particular target group that you have taken for your research, so you clearly state that okay, for my case I have only considered the say school going kids, or it is the college higher education student, or it is only the corporate officers. So for that, like definitely the question will not be diverted to others part, that what is the consequences or what could be the possible outcome if you have done it for the other part of the population. After that, you need to make the conclusion where you have to give very brief summary of the findings and summarize the overall key contribution of the research. So this particular part definitely very crucial, but at the same time in this case it should match with the introduction of and the overall your objective, so that one can understand that how much you have achieved, how much you could able to answer to your research questions. Then implication, this is very important, that okay, we have done our work, we concluded there are interesting findings, but what next? Whether there will be some implication, whether there will be some kind of practical implication, or there will be some kind of managerial implication, or that can also give something towards the policy implication. So that you need to pinpoint, because that is something is very required pertinent to the research in planning and architecture, because we are doing something very specially, or it is something many a times is very tangible outcome that we are expecting as a prototype design or something. So then that is to be clear. And after that, the recommendation. So based on the study, we have to also may have a recommendation. So it can be a practical recommendation, or it can be a direction to the stakeholder or practitioner. If it is a policy oriented, if it is some guidance oriented, that okay, performance of a particular company will depend on certain kind of core competency, or it may be something that okay, you should not rely on totally on the outsourcing of your activity. So in all such cases, that how your research is going to give a direction, that what strategy that they are going to do. If it is something like a innovation in a building materials or a particular building block, so then the prototype, that how effective it will be, and compared to the available other materials, how efficient it is in terms of carrying the load, in terms of the thermal resistance, or in terms of the price. So that is very important, and many a times you may end up with some kind of findings depending on the research where there may not be a direct practical implication, but that can be a value addition to the existing concept and theory. So that theoretical research can also play a crucial role in that aspect. Now coming to this particular part, which is also very common and maybe at different stages you are, if I assume that you are like doing your master dissertation, or maybe you are in a stage to finalize your thesis, or maybe you just aim to make it. So these are very general structures of a thesis. So it will have a title page, it will have the name of the topic, then other academic credentials, name, your registration number, logo of your institute, etc., etc. Normally this is very standardized in any institution that you say. Then you have the acknowledgement section where you can acknowledge all the persons, all the organizations that you would like to acknowledge who help you in some regards for your thesis. It may be something that somebody also motivate you to do the research, it may be something someone funded you for some activity. So it is the place where you can give your own share your own feeling and give the acknowledgement. Then this is very important table of content, which includes all the chapterization with the page number, all the figures and all. Then you have list of figures and tables, and also if you have more number of abbreviations, so list of abbreviation can also come up here. Then you need to make an abstract. Normally it is 1 to 1 page, or sometimes it may go to 2 page for a PhD thesis, where you can give the synopsis of your entire work, okay, in very limited words, that what is the background, what was your objective, how you have achieved the objective, what are the critical findings, what is the limitation, and then finally that what you are contributing to the existing research. Then you will have the introduction chapter where you state the background, then research gap, and then you can also say about the research questions, aims and objectives, and also the organization of the entire thesis, then literature review section. So this is again I am saying very standardized way I am telling it. Maybe some of the theses may not follow the similar chapterization or similar structuring. So literature review can be something that which is distributed among different introduction and all. After that we will have a methodology. Normally we prefer to give in a flow diagram and then we describe it in detail. Then we talk about the database. Here we normally say about the application area, like the case study, then type of survey, then all the sample and all. Then we go for a result section where you can showcase the result pictorially, and also you can write, interpret. Then the discussion section. So many a times the result and discussion section, they are combined, especially in many cases in a research paper it is combined. Then you come to a conclusion where it will be pinpointed conclusion which will be in accordance to your objective, and then the reference, we cannot ignore it. All the documents that you have cited in your thesis, so that should have the full list of references including books, journal, book chapters, conferences, any other media. And then if you have something to add like in appendix, many times the calculation, algorithm, questionnaire, this we can add. Now here the key point is that this is a typical chapterization or the overall structure of a thesis, but it may vary. It may happen that you have 4 objectives and next 4 chapters is based on the objective. So then it will have a standalone methodology. So it again depends on how you want to portray your overall research, and also there might be some kind of standard guideline in your institution. So better that you follow that guideline, and then you can discuss it with your friends, your supervisors, your teachers, and then uh, make this, because this is something, overall, like your entire research journey will be structured, and then a good structuring, a good flow of this particular thesis will be really really helpful, not only for you, it is also helpful for the examiner to evaluate. It will also help your you know further researcher to follow that what you have done. And it is definitely a challenging one. It is not that, within a limited time frame you do all this compilation. So while doing your research, you to start writing it, because okay, finalization, working on the draft, and then fine tuning can be done at the later stage, but this is the entire write up. You can consider that your overall research in 2 3 years or 4 years will be compiled in only just few 100 200 pages. Normally that is normal size of a thesis. So it is very difficult, because you have to be very crisp, concise enough to put the information in a sequential manner, so that it will convey all the meaning that you intend to do. So this is all for this particular, you know lecture, and also here we are ending up that research process part 3, and we discussed all the stages. So in this particular lecture we have understood this particular analysis of data, what is the meaning of hypothesis testing, and then some of the testing that we discussed, then the interpretation and reporting and different kind of aspect of it, and then also I have given you the very basic generalized structure of a thesis. And then definitely you can choose whatever, like the structuring that is being prescribed in your institution, or recommended by your supervisor or your college. So with that, hope this is very useful to guide you for better structuring of your research. And then if you have further questions on any of the particular topic, please, please write us in the forum. We'll get back to you as soon as possible. With that, thank you once again. We'll be meeting up with our next section of research writing. So there we'll discuss about different stages and some of the good tips that I'll share, that helped me to write good amount of research papers. And then some of the drawbacks of poor writing, and some of the critical consideration that you need to think while you are preparing your research paper. So with that, thank you once again for joining the course. We'll be meeting in our next lecture. Thank you.